All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's speed learning session. We'll give everyone just another moment or two to join. Happy Thursday. Thanks for being here. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So, welcome again. Today's speed learning session. Is there ever a good time for a nonprofit tech change? I'm Hannah Fox, Associate Director of Client Success and Experience at Giveffect. For those of you who are not as familiar, Giveffect is an all-in-one nonprofit platform that brings together the tools organizations need to operate effectively, including donor management, volunteer management, CRM, marketing, and more. All of the tools to help your nonprofit operate smoothly, achieve operational efficiency, financial stability, and further your mission. And today, I'm so excited to welcome our speaker, Jill Lash, Program Coordinator at Free Mom Hugs. Before we dive into today's session, I just want to go over a couple of items. Today's session format is a quick 30-minute session broken up by 20 minutes of learning, followed by 10 minutes of audience Q&A. So please be sure to share your questions throughout the session using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. We're also going to give coffee to three of you joining us today. To enter, simply follow us on LinkedIn, like one of our July posts, and share a key takeaway, something you learned, or something you plan to do from today's session in the comment. Be sure to tag us at Giveffect in that comment. Winners will be selected at random and notified via email around noon today, just about 30 minutes after our session ends. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So, is there ever a good time for nonprofit tech change? Every nonprofit has a busy season, whether it's year end, Giving Tuesday, your annual gala, or something else like Pride, maybe. There's always a reason to wait. Today, we're going to talk with someone who decided not to wait. We're excited to welcome Jill Lash, Program Coordinator at Free Mom Hugs, to share why her team made the change before their busiest season, what they learned, and the impact that the change has made, and what they'd tell other nonprofits facing that same decision. Jill, thank you so much for being here. To get us started, could you just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about Free Mom Hugs, your role, the organization, all the things?
Sure. Um, as Hannah said, I'm Jill Lash, Program Coordinator for Free Mom Hugs. I started as a volunteer and chapter leader in Michigan in 2019. Um, it's quickly, very quickly after that, I started as a national volunteer, and now I'm on national staff. If you haven't heard of Free Mom Hugs or don't know what we are, Free Mom Hugs started actually as a very small grassroots movement in Oklahoma City. When our founder, Sarah Cunningham, went to the Oklahoma City Pride Parade with a handmade button that just said Free Mom Hugs. And she stood at that end of the Pride Parade and offered free mom hugs and or high fives, because not everybody's a hugger, of course. You have to respect that. And shortly thereafter, a handful of parents got together and formed a small local nonprofit that they were fundraising for things like bus passes to get folks in the queer community maybe to a safe space or a hotel stay, food, just other immediate needs. And in 2018, Sarah made a Facebook post that went just viral overnight. And it said, basically, if your bio parents will come to your same-sex wedding, call me, I'll be there. It went viral. Somebody had to explain to Sarah what viral meant, because she wasn't sure. And it took off from there. There was media attention, a little bit of celebrity attention, and I think most surprisingly for Sarah and the other parents in Oklahoma City was the hundreds of parents that were, me too, I want to do that too. By the end of 2019, there was nearly 30 chapters, probably 25 chapter leader chapters, very loosely.
Mhm.
We had shown up at over 100 prides that year, and very quickly kind of late 29, 28, I think it was 2018 actually, but they became a national nonprofit almost instantaneously with no structure, no nothing, no staff even. And my role began kind of then, and ever since has been working with our ED who came on in 2020 to just build the entire chapter and volunteer structure, programs, processes, infrastructure, everything. And here we are, 40,000, 45, over 45,000 volunteers, over 300 chapter leaders, a few international affiliates, and here we are in 2026, much bigger and much wiser.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I think it's so
Thanks.
nice. I think there's so much context that adds to today's conversation that you all have
Yes.
an interesting structure that, not every nonprofit shares. Some do, of course, have these bigger national kind of like parent organizations. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much for sharing
Of
a little bit more
course.
about
Yeah.
that. Before you had Giveffect, what did your managing fundraising, volunteers, events, operations look like? Really what challenges was your team experiencing?
Uh, Before Giveffect, it was spreadsheets and a lot of hope, patience holding us together. I mean, we had 43 chapters, and each chapter had two primary spreadsheets. We had multiple national spreadsheets on top of 50 kind of peer-to-peer fundraising pages for each of our chapters sitting on an old fundraise, I think it was called. It had very limited capabilities as far as how to earmark money for our states and just reporting on all that kind of thing. But I think the biggest problem was is that all of our information was coming in on Google Forms that belonged to national, and that information was being moved to these 45 spreadsheets for the chapter leaders to access their information, and that was awful. But I think the worst part of that was what happened to that information once it was on those sheets, because every state developed their own process. Every state
Mm.
was editing that information, who was active, who wasn't, who moved, who wanted off the list, all of those things. And not to mention, we had no way to track who was showing up, volunteer hours, where people were showing up. So we had to develop these systems or systems of like just data, right, to move that information back and forth. But the hardest was is we just could not get consistent impact numbers. um,
Mhm.
with when you have to rely, I mean, we're already asking volunteers to do a lot of admin, so that was hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I know during one of our previous calls, you'd mentioned that I think there was always a reason for you to wait. You felt like these spreadsheets weren't working for you any longer,
Right.
but there was still something that you had to wait for in order to make that change. So what finally made your decision, or made your team decide that it was ready to move forward?
um, Pride 2025. There, well, or we'll back up just a little bit, but our growth from 20, we were seeing consistent 25% growth between volunteers, activity leader, events, that kind of thing. But after the election in 24, there was just nearly doubled, and almost again immediately. We went from 30 something volunteers registering to over 100 volunteers registering, which is a great problem to have.
Yeah.
But we knew, with two full-time staff members kind of managing day-to-day operations of all of that. So we knew we couldn't wait. Um, we would always there was always a saying we would start using around March of every year after Pride. We'll look at that after, we'll get to that after Pride, and it we just simply could not wait. Where there was no way that the two staff members were doing the day-to-day operations could continue like that. And at one point, I think it was right before Pride of 2025, our AD Carrie sent me an email that was just it was a Giveffect email, just kind of a cold call email. And
Yeah.
she never clicks on them, but she sent it to me and she said, I think this might be too good to be true. And I wrote back, said, I don't think it's too good to be true, but it might be out of our budget. And she said, after Pride, our biggest problem was always kind of prioritizing what was the most important after Pride.
Mhm.
And I went back this morning and I looked in the very first email contact on our meeting with Julia, our salesperson, was July 9th. So I think that was the quickest we ever moved. I mean,
I was
June
gonna
30th,
say,
it's like we're done with
yeah.
Pride. Like our chapters are still going, but we have got to focus. So we couldn't wait. There was no way. So it just that became the priority at that point.
I love that you looked back to find that it was
I had
seriously
to,
a week later. That's
yeah.
great. I guess tell us a little bit more too about your like what made the decision for you all to move towards Give Effect.
We looked at a few systems before, and the way they were presented, demoed, or I guess their process, it seemed like over our head. Um, Mind you, most of us are my age, women 50s. We kind of all formed this nonprofit, and we have staff, a couple staff we've hired, but that I think was the scariest thing for us. And the process with what we now call GE was always from at our level, at our pace, which was fast, but also uh, we were nervous.
Yeah.
The, the way that it was, and I think also to another big one was just that all modules were kind of in one, and there wasn't the scary increase with every feature we needed. And the ability to be able to talk to someone so one-on-one and discuss, we have very unique needs with staff
Mhm.
needing certain access, but 300 volunteer chapter leaders needing access and the ability to accommodate that. And it never seemed to phase anyone on the Giveffect team. The trial period was long and very patient. So we just always kind of felt like from the moment we started the process, it was just happening and it was the place to be, the place to go with.
Well, thank you so much. We
Yeah.
appreciate that, and we're so happy to partner with you all. I know that you all took a kind of a phased approach. You know, not tr rather than trying to migrate everything all at one time. What did that look like? Why was that the right approach for your team and your organization?
Um, we knew pretty much right off the bat that the most important the most important piece was getting nationals daily operations in and then slowly phasing our leaders because we do have all the different leaders who are going to eventually need to get in and do volunteer management and event management and those kind of things. But we had to kind of build the boat or
Mhm.
plane or whatever before we could start bringing people in, right? So we knew right off the bat we had to get our data in. We had to move all of our fundraising pages over, learn how that worked, create a new month end system, figure out how all of these things were going to happen. But also, we knew that every year Pride starts earlier for the organization, and we are pretty much, it doesn't end. However, the biggest prep is like January through April.
Mhm.
And that's when we were moving in. I mean, we decided to get the data in by December and at least get national operations in, but also give our volunteer leaders who prepping for Pride and showing up at over 1,000 events in June is enough. So we knew better than to try to throw a new event sign up process or a new event tracking app. But we moved 5 states in who are kind of beta, doing the beta testing with us and
Right.
creating those processes. So because the people implementing it and creating it are people who are also doing the work every day. So
Mhm.
we couldn't do all of that at once because once we get the leaders and then we have to start rolling this out to our volunteer base and how do they use it. So there's also a tiered training process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was so smart of your team to consider like let's really nail down the processes with
Mm-hmm.
these first 5 states, just see how things go so that when it is time to open it up to everyone, you already know how this is going to work, what you need to do to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah,
I know that you guys are still in your transition, right? You haven't moved all of those chapter leaders yet into Give Effect, all the
right.
states. Where have you already started to see a positive impact, especially thinking just, Pride is pretty recently,
Mhm.
just wrapped up. So tell us a little bit more about like this year and some of the positive impact that you saw.
I think now that we're a full month out of Pride, I think we're kind of looking back and seeing that it became a year instead of like, where is that information? Um, we kind of knew where it was. We had all
Mhm.
just worked very hard to get it where it was, and then learning how to find it and who was going to use it and how we were going to use it. But we've seen more consistency, definitely more consistency. I mean, before all of these things would just depend heavily on who handled something or what spreadsheet or form was using. And like we're able to now build workflows that are repeatable,
Mhm.
um, and sustainable and trainable. I just
Mhm.
recently, for the first time ever, took 2 weeks off, and I think it was because I could just literally open up Giveffect and say, "Here everything is. Here's a video on how to do it. I'm gonna shut down for 2 weeks." So that, I
Yeah.
mean, that's huge. That's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. And I think everyone deserves that to be able to take the time off and walk away knowing
Absolutely.
that your team knows where to find something and knows how to take care of it while you're out.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think not only, like you said, the processes are repeatable, they're trainable, but I think also like scalable. You're able to
Right.
think about the continued growth and that those processes are going to grow with you.
Right.
Um, where our conversation is wonderful and the time is flying by. So just for everyone, please make sure to input any questions that you have in your Q&A box. Um, so was there anything that surprised you during the process or anything that you would do differently if you were starting again today?
The biggest surprise for me, it wasn't just about um, finding the system and getting all the systems in there. It's really changing the way you work. It
Mhm.
really took just so much. You can't just take your old processes right and your old forms and just plug them in and just everything's going to be better. It was uh, just a constant, why did we do it? Why did we do it this way? Would this way be better? And having the tools to figure out, right? Lots of tutorials to go through. Oh, this would work for that system or process or whatever. So I think that was just like, it changes everything. Like learning to, what do you do for, where do I go first, even when I log in the morning, right? It's
Right.
just a completely different world.
I think that's
That
such
was the
an
biggest.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point that you make that it doesn't have to be you take everything exactly how you were doing it and just plug it in. You can really
Mhm.
stop and like use the transition as an opportunity to evaluate why you were doing
Right,
things the way you were doing them.
right.
Yeah. If someone asked you today, was it worth making the change? What would you tell them?
Uh, I don't, I would, I would turn around with another question. I mean, like, can you afford not to? It, we like you're never magically going to be not as busy. It just doesn't happen, and it just like the biggest decision probably, and or if you were operating and flying by the seat of our pants with our hair on fire, it's what we used to call it, every day, you get to the point where you're no longer just reacting, which is what it was. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just a lot of reaction. So I mean, it just, we built an organization that our infrastructure could just simply not withstand, and at some point that's going to crumble. So you hit the, and we did that Pride 20, that was it. Got the
Right.
system, hired a full-time person, and now we're 3 people strong and a great system that we're still learning.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said that a lot of what you were doing was reacting.
Mhm.
Do you feel like even you've had a little bit of time now to not be so reactive, but a little bit more like forward thinking about your outreach and things like that?
All the time.
Yeah.
And every single Monday, the volunteer outreach coordinator and I kind of get together and go, is it, was it, did it seem quiet? This, like, what are we gonna find? What's happened? And it just, it's
Yeah.
not like that. So we're literally working on what our onboarding and vetting system is going to look like in GE when we get there in September. We
Hmm.
would never be working on September things by the end of July any other year, and after our biggest year ever,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. I love that. Well, so awesome. And I think that so many organizations can relate to the way that you were feeling and hopefully they've gotten some snippets today where they're able to think about how to be less reactive through their
Mhm.
processes. It's already time for our questions, so audience Q&A time. Our first one here, what part of the transition made the biggest difference for your team right away?
The minute we could turn on the 50 fundraising campaigns, individual links the states can share. Before it was copying, pasting from fundraise to our spreadsheets and ledgers, and now we can just sort those by state, sort those by type of donation, download that into a spreadsheet, and there's this one chapter's financials. It's so many less steps for both the executive director and I at the end of every month. And
Yeah.
that's only going to get better once the chapter leaders are in there and they're able to download that information for themselves.
Hmm.
So,
Right,
yeah.
right. Absolutely. The second one here, how did you build buy-in across your staff and volunteers? Everyone is so busy. Like how did you guys really build that buy-in across your team?
Fortunately, I think for us, the executive director and myself were the two who went through this process because we were the ones developing the daily processes and took the rest of the staff who it was not difficult. I mean, they knew how hard this was. It really wasn't. And then another fortunate thing for us is a couple of our board members, because we were so up until 25, we're working board members and they knew what we were going through. So, and it was
Hmm.
just long overdue. We had talked about systems before. So, fortunately for us, it wasn't too difficult. Um, and they trusted us very much in that process. So, it was pretty easy for us.
I love that. That's nice. And nice that you had the trust amongst your team to be able to
Yes.
make those decisions. Absolutely. What is one piece of advice that you'd give a nonprofit that's just starting to evaluate a technology change?
Hmm. The, the biggest piece of advice I can just be is recognizing the the busiest season it isn't the problem. Like that's not your problem. It's the infrastructure's capability or functionality or whatever. That is the problem. Like it wasn't that Pride was so busy. It really wasn't. I mean, it was just as busy this year. Yeah, we still had some challenges, but completely different challenges that actually there was probably going to be a better outcome because we found the challenge. So, and you don't have to do everything at once. Phase it in, start
Mhm.
small. But if you've already outgrown the systems that you've built, you're almost too late. Almost like before it's on fire, get to it. Like that's just that may be super simple, but I think for us that was like the biggest realization is once we had something that could handle the volume of what we were
Mhm.
and streamline it, it was that's just the way to go.
Yeah. And it's so refreshing to know that your team did this in such a phased approach and didn't expect everything to be done all at once.
Yeah.
I think it is, for a lot of teams it's hard to hear that you've been working on this transition for close to a year now.
Mhm.
But it also on the flip side of that, you've had all of this time to really build out your processes, know how you're going to move forward and really fully adopt it. And your team will be better off in the future for that. So like even though you weren't able to necessarily like come in and get this knocked out in 6 weeks, you still have seen impact. You've still seen the way that things have improved. And then also you're able to set yourself up for your future self for
Yeah.
success, which I think
Right.
is so important.
Yeah, it is. We like to say too that we know we're not always going to be here. We're setting this
Yeah.
up for the next team, right? Like it's for our daily work, but it's for the next ones too.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
the
I
only way
think
we're
that's
going to protect free mom hugs, right? And keep showing up. That's what we think, or what I think.
no, I love that. I think that's such an important message and such a good note to leave off on. Jill, thank you so much for sharing
Yes.
your story and just being so open about your experience. I think one of the biggest takeaways from today's conversation is that there's truly never a perfect time to
Right.
make a technology change, but with the right plan and the right partner, it doesn't have to feel overwhelming. It doesn't have to feel really rushed. So just thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for having
appreciate
us.
you
Yeah.
and so happy to partner with Free Mom Hugs. Um,
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone who joined today. If you'd like to continue the conversation, my colleague Tara will share how to stay in touch with Jill and our team in the chat. And if you'd like to explore what a thoughtful technology transition could look like for your organization, we'd love to connect. And don't forget to enter our Coffee on Us giveaway. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so much.